I'm like, what happened? I'm soaking wet. I'm Randy Pobst, professional race car driver, coming to you from Throttlestop in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. But really, I'm a bike guy. I've raced cars, but my true love deep down inside has always been two wheels and motorcycles. I've just never been crazy enough to try to race one. And at the beginning of my driving career, I lived in Florida. And Florida has this wonderful rule where when you're 15 years old, you can ride a 5 horsepower or less motorcycle by yourself on the highways. And my wonderful, generous Air Force dad got me and my brother motorcycles. Even though he couldn't ride on the road for another year and a half, I took off on the road riding motorcycles. And that was my main transportation. I mean, I would borrow the family cars, but it wasn't until I took one of my bikes and traded it that I got my very first car. I'm going to say 17 years old. I had only had motorcycles up till then, and I kind of fell in love with this sporty little two-seater, a Fiat 850 Spider. Bet a lot of you have never even heard of that car. Guess what 850 means? That's the size of the engine. Yep, 850 cc's. It was barely more than my motorcycle. And I traded a Honda CB450 for it that I never liked. It had high handlebars. I'm not a high handlebar guy. And kind of a funky custom paint job. And it's funny, in those days, that would have been somewhere around 1974 or 5. The motorcycle was about a 1971. The Fiat was, I think, a 70. These things were only 4 or 5 years old. That'd be a 2020. But they seemed old. And I mean, that's just the way it was. I think stuff got old faster then. This Fiat, well, there's two really special things about this car. It had a new paint job on it. It was kind of a metallic green. And so it looked good. The top was kind of worn out and ratty. Now, mind you, it's only a few years old. And it ran good. So I'm driving around in this Fiat proudly. I put the top down pretty much all the time, but it's raining hard. Not long after, and I'm in Florida, and when it rains hard in Florida, it is not messing around. There's a lot of water. I turned into a shopping center, and I found myself covered in a tidal wave of water that washes over me from behind. And I'm like, what happened? I'm soaking wet. Well, what happened was this Fiat was probably from somewhere up north. Turns out the floors were plywood. There was no floor. It had completely rusted out. And there's just a sheet of plywood laying there with carpet on it. This car taught me, always look under a car before you buy it, because you never know. Underneath that Fiat was gone. There was like an X-frame, remember? It was a V-frame, because the back of the X was gone. So no floor. Hey, I kept driving it anyway. I guess it was held together by the rocker panels and whatever the center tunnel was. But the Fiat was a rear-engine car. So there was not much else going on. I don't know how that stayed together. The other funny thing about that Fiat, it remains the car that had the most things wrong with it that I ever drove on the street at one time, right? So I'm a kid going to high school in this Fiat 850, ran good, wouldn't idle. I guess there was a vacuum leak somewhere. So when I pull up to a light, I've got to keep it running there. You can't run like brrr. You have to vroom, vroom, vroom just to keep it running. Well, number two, the muffler had broken and fallen off. So it's loud. So every time I pull up to a light, you can hear I'm going vroom, 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 like race me, right? I never raced anybody. It only had 45 horsepower, no, 50, I think, on a good day. It did run great once you got off idle. Number three, clutch. Clutch was worn out. Clutch was slipping. I think that car had 60,000 miles on it or something, which is a lot for a little Fiat that's only 4 years old. Worn out clutch. So when I did pull away, it would slip like crazy. And it got me really good at feeding the torque to keep it from slipping anymore, because I knew just intuitively the more the thing slipped, the worse it would wear and the worse it would be. Also, virtually no top. You couldn't see through the back window of the top, and it didn't attach anymore. It just hung down in the car. Maybe that's how the floor got rusted out, just from being rained right into the car. And guess what? Bonus, no brakes. When you hit the pedal, it did not slow the car down in any way. There was only enough hydraulic pressure. I'd hit the brake pedal to light the brake lights, and I'd stop with the handbrake. The handbrake did work. So no brakes, no clutch, no idle, no muffler, and I'm driving this thing to school, sounding like I'm trying to race everything that pulls up next to me. But I love the car, and I'd love to have one again someday. You almost always want your first car back, right? But running right.